Shalom, everyone. I'm busy cleaning for Pesach, getting ready for Passover like everybody else. And anyway, on the way down to the chicken coop, I found this very nice, naturally shed wild turkey feather. And I thought this would be good to use for the ceremony of Badikat Chometz, the search for leaven. Now, the search for leaven includes cleaning your house, cleaning your kitchen, changing your dishes over to the Passover dishes, etc. But then at the end of all that, there's a tradition that you hide a few little pieces of leaven around the house, and then you go and you search for them, and you sweep them up with a feather, and you take that out and you burn it in the backyard. Or if you can't actually go out to burn it, you can at least throw it into the garbage. And at that point, you're rid of the leaven, and you make the blessing Bital Chometz, which means nullifying any leaven that you might have missed, any crumb that you didn't see. Sometimes you think you got it all, but there's something behind the couch. I don't know. Anything that you might have missed is nullified. It doesn't exist. It's meaningless. And if you do find it later, you toss it out. Now, why am I telling you this in the middle of the woods? Well, because this reminds me of a story that I like to tell every year around Passover time. Now, Rebbe Nachman of Breslov got to thinking one time, what would have happened if somebody dropped a piece of bread or some other kind of leaven down the well? Because even 1/1000th of an amount of chometz in something makes it not kosher for Passover. So suppose some guy was sitting there and he was having a sandwich and it fell down the well. Or suppose that happened down by the creek where you got the water from, because they didn't have plumbing back then. They went out and they got it in buckets and they brought it home. Now, this was something that bothered him really a lot. And he finally came to the conclusion that the only way that he would be able to be absolutely sure that what he had was totally kosher for Passover was to go out and camp out in the woods next to a spring where the water was bubbling fresh up out of the earth. Then he would know nobody touched it, nobody dropped anything in it. Now the problem is the only such spring was like 2 hours away or whatever, a long way from the village he lived in. And that meant that he would be away from his family, he'd be away from his congregation, he'd be away from the community, nobody would be at his Seder, he'd be all by himself sitting next to a bubbling brook making Pesach. What kind of a Seder would that be? It would take the joy out of the holy day. And so he came to the conclusion it wasn't necessary to become that obsessive compulsive about getting rid of every little bit of chometz. As he put it, the Torah was given to human beings, not to ministering angels. We actually do have a spring on our property way back there in the woods that feeds into this little pond, which is now frozen. But I never did take the story that literally until this year. Because of the pandemic, many of us this year really are doing our Seders in isolation. And this story becomes very relevant, not so much about the chometz per se, but about the question of how do you keep the joy? How can you do a Seder away from the community and still have joy? And so this has caused a lot of us to rethink the way that we're doing Judaism. Even some very Orthodox rabbis have said because of the emotional trauma of being isolated from family and community, that you can do a Seder by Zoom. And some people are using videos. There's various different things people are trying to be able to have the joy and the celebration. I will leave it up to you how you handle that in your mind or in your observance. But the bottom line is we need to focus on the holy day as a time of freedom and a time of celebration, and look forward to the time when we will again have the freedom to come together in a Seder around the family table.